Welcome to my third installment of MALvlog. Today's topic is 30 years of tarot, which references that I've been reading tarot cards for, that's a big approximation, 30 years. It's probably actually more than that. I am 48 years old. I keep saying that because, first of all, people say I don't look my age. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know. But I started reading tarot when I was 12 years old, which is a really young age for that kind of stuff. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background. Also, just to inform this, I taught tarot. I taught a tarot workshop this past weekend for 8 hours. Level 1 of 3 levels. I teach tarot 3 levels. Maybe we'll talk about that. So I figured it's still fresh in my energy field. Why not talk about exactly that? I got my first deck of tarot cards as a result of going away on vacation with my family. We drove down from Long Island to Key West when I was 12 years old. You can imagine that was a very, very long car trip. It is a very, very long car trip. So before we, went on the trip, we all did our shopping and got our stuff. And my mom took me to what is no longer in Bayshore, but what used to be called the farmer's market. Now, when you think of a farmer's market now, you think of like, a parking lot where people put up quick ups and they sell their produce and stuff like that. This was not that. The farmer's market was up on Sunrise Highway in Bayshore. I think it was on Brentwood Road, where Brentwood Road and Sunrise intersected, and it was huge. It was a covered building. It was actually looked like a bunch of different buildings kind of linked together, and there were stalls. So there was like the pickle guy and the guy who made fresh mozzarella and everything. They had clothes, they had everything. But one thing that they had for sure was a comic book place. There was a comic book guy with the long rows of cardboard boxes with them stacked in like that. So because I was a comic book addict as a child, any form of mythology really helped me survive as a kid. My mom gave me money and said, here, go buy yourself comic books for the trip down. And don't read them until you get in the car, obviously, because I could buzz through those things really quickly. So I got a bunch of them, and one of them was a Justice League comic that had tarot in it. The necromancer, sorcerer Felix Faust, potato, and he was using the characters in the tarot cards to attack the Justice League. So for some reason that really hit me. Well, if you want to talk sacred contracts, I've got a reader in me, an intuitive servant, if you will, in there somewhere. So I was just fascinated, and I read it over and over and over and over and over. But, one of maybe 20, 30 comic books that I brought with me. Then when we got to Key West, I think we were staying at the hotel right at the docks, where they watch the sun go down every day, and there's a big party. Pier House, I think was the name of it. I don't know if it's still there. I'll check that on Google, see if that's still there. And those little brochures they have in the bedside table, next to the Bible. Things to do in Key West. So I'm flipping through it because I had read all my comic books already, because that's how I roll. And leafing through it, and there was this little quarter-page ad that had the word tarot in it. Now, probably at the time I called it tarot because everybody calls it tarot. But if you're watching this and you're still calling it tarot, it is tarot, T-A-R-O-T. The last T is silent. So there it was. It was a synchronicity before I even knew what a synchronicity was. And I hounded my mother. We were there for maybe a week and a half. Yeah, about that long, I think. So I hounded my mother, take me to this place, take me to this place. Now, I didn't realize at the time the place I was asking her to take me was a magical shop. I should have known by the pentacle and the sword and the cup and the wand that was in the ad. But, I didn't know then. I hadn't quite gotten to Scott Cunningham. I hadn't quite gotten to Wicca and witchcraft yet. So I hounded her. She wouldn't take me. I really could have walked there. But I needed the money to buy what I wanted to buy, because I knew I wanted a deck of cards, and I knew I wanted a deck of that, and I believe the artwork was somewhat based on the Rider-Waite tarot. I was a little bit of a nudge, which is the word my mom called me. Nudge and angel, so there's the dichotomy. Angel, nudge, nudge, angel. So I wore her down, and she said, fine. And so we went, and here's what I remember. I remember her standing outside with me, giving me the money, say, you go inside. She wouldn't go in. That's my mom. So I go in and I tell the woman behind the counter that I'm looking for a tarot deck, and she goes, "Oh, start with the Rider-Waite tarot," and I'll throw a picture of that up, because that's the deck everybody starts with. And she said you might want to get a book because the little booklet in the tarot pack isn't great. I'm sure that's not exactly what she said, but I got the message. So I ended up getting a book that way above my pay grade, way above what I could understand, but it was called Tarot, A Handbook for the New Apprentice by Eileen Connolly, and I think I still have that copy of it packed away in a box. It was soft cover, so I know the front cover fell off, but I'm a Virgo pack rat when it comes to books. I'm throw out books if I can avoid it. I'll lend them, but whatever. So I walked out of there with my first deck of tarot, and by the way, I remember they had crystal balls in there too, but they were like over $100. There was no way I was going to be able to convince my mom to buy me a crystal ball. So I walked out of there with my first Rider-Waite tarot deck and a book, and it was a pretty big size book. And for really the rest of the trip, that's all I did was read the book and look at the cards and back and forth and back and forth. And I just remember there was so much information in that book about tarot. It had the card by card analysis, what it meant upright, what it meant reversed, and spreads and all of that. And I was just like eating that information. And she talked about the Kabbalah and Gnothology, Gnothology, I think is how you spell that. And the word tetragrammaton kept popping up in the book. So I remember being in the car with my mom at one point and saying, "Mom," I'm looking through my book, "Mom, what does tetragrammaton mean?" She goes, "It's the Hebrew word for God. What are you reading?" I was like, "Nothing." That actually happened. I doubt she remembers it, but I really remember that. My mom was just happy I was reading something, but she's a teacher. So, yeah, I read a lot. On the ride home from Key West back to New York, we stopped and visited, like my grandfather and my grandmother. They were divorced when I was very young, so they lived in different parts of Florida. And like, you know, we sort of went places, and each place I went, I would read people. Like my first readings were for family. Now, not the people I was traveling with, they couldn't care less. They were like, no kid. But my Aunt Betty, and I started reading them, you know, out of the book. Like I was not at that point professional intuitive level where I could just like, let it hit, let it through, let it make it rain, intuitively make it rain. But what hooked me was the eyes bugging out of their heads as the things that I was saying and reading just out of the book were like really connecting. And it was probably the first set of adult type conversations. I don't mean adult like, you know, NC-17 adult. I mean like I was actually communicating on a more mature level. And, you know, I have to say, throughout my life, the majority of my friends have always been older. I've usually been the youngest in the deck until I went to, the youngest in the group until I got to college. So that really impressed me. I was like, ooh, these are cool. These are cool. I really like this. You know, when you just get hooked, where there's like, ooh. And I do believe that there was a pre-incarnational agreement, sacred contract involved in that, because I took to it like a fish to water. So by the time I got back, not only was I hooked, but I wanted to read anybody who would sit still long enough. And really, that wasn't happening in my home with my family. But at school, the kids were interested. And at that point, I still saw it as fortune telling. But I'm going to tell you something about tarot. And really most forms of divination. It's not about telling your fortune or reading the future or anything like that. Tarot, as well as probably most systems of divination, don't predict the future. And now, because I've studied a little quantum physics, I know why that is. It's like GPS. GPS tells you where you are. And you tell the GPS system where you want to go, and then it plots a course, right? Tarot is the same thing. The best thing that tarot can do is give you a clear symbolic picture of where you are right now. And as you're shuffling the cards, you essentially tell the cards where you want to go, what you want to do, who you want to be, what you want to have, what you want to look at least, and then it plots a course. It's not the only way to go there. It's saying fastest route, shortest route. So yeah, my work, by the way, as a professional reader is to bring people clarity, not to make prediction, because at best, and this is really at best, and it's a good at best, A divination system gives you a snapshot of where your energy is on any given subject right in that moment. It's like a little snapshot, like an X-ray. Like if you get an X-ray on Monday, your bodies, your bones you're gonna change and evolve over time. So you just don't have that one X-ray forever. You would go back, like if you had a broken bone and they wanted to check and see how it's set. I guess they would take, a bunch of them over time to see how things set. CAT scan, MRI, probably the same thing. I've never had one. That's my work. My work is help empower people. I think that when you make predictions via divination for yourself or for someone else, you're casting a psychological spell. Ooh, and that would be a good subject for another vlog, is psychological spells, not just the candle, crystal, herb, word spells, but how you can put a psychological spell on yourself or someone else. When you tell somebody this is what's going to happen, their belief system kicks in and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's not my work. And I just taught tarot this weekend, and I tried to make it very clear that that is not how I teach people to read, that I teach people that you are there essentially as a servant and as a messenger to relay information so that people can answer their own questions, so that they can plot their own way. And I make it very clear that the outcome in this spread, you spread out the cards in a numeric progression, each position having a meaning, a symbolic meaning, that then they can make their own choices and decisions, hopefully more empowering than disempowering. So I started reading kids at parties and at school, and I went to a summer camp. I would bring them with me, and during lunch I would read. Girl, read! I would just be reading people. And one thing I learned from that now, in retrospect, is that tarot is a magnificent symbolic system that really helps develop intuition. It's like lifting weights. You don't have to like lifting weights. You can love lifting weights, but if you do it, you're going to develop muscle, right? Well, the muscles you develop through reading really any divination system, but tarot really speaks to me, is intuitive muscle, so to speak. And I'm a Pisces moon, so that is probably why I was so good at it right away. So, that's why I can't call myself a professional reader from that age. No, it was probably around the time I went to college, and I went to the Boston Conservatory of Music, Dance, and Theater for a year and a half, and my spiritual awakening hit. So I was out of there. I was up and out of academia and college, and I never wanted to take another class again, except for things that I wanted to learn about. Remember, I said in another blog, I'm a horrible student, but I'm a great teacher, so I teach myself. So I taught myself tarot. And of course, there were lots of other books along the way, little mass market paperbacks about this means that. And I learned that even though all of the different books gave the cards somewhat general meanings, there was so much interpretation that you really couldn't say this card only means this. Like the death card. The death card doesn't always mean literal physical death. In fact, it rarely does. It means transformation from the bones out. That's why the image of the skeleton is so repetitive. Also want to say I've read a lot of different tarot decks. I did not stick with the Rider-Waite forever. It's not the deck I read now. But I found one that was called the Element Tarot or the Elemental Tarot, which was really good and came with the book. The Mythic Tarot. I loved the Mythic Tarot because it was based on Greek mythology, which is sort of my wheelhouse. I love Greek mythology. I am a Dionysus archetype dominant, but I got other ones in there. Otherwise, the 80s would have killed me. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, or all three of them. I even bought the Salvador Dali Tarot. It was $99, gilt-edged, beautiful deck, but it wasn't designed by Salvador Dali. I thought it was. It was somebody took Salvador Dali's artwork and put it into a tarot card system. So beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but the type of guidance it gave was don't buy any pocket watches. They'll melt. Beware of camels that have women's breasts for knees. Not great, not helpful. Then I was at a party. I was in college. I came home for a weekend or a vacation, and I was hanging out with my friend Ellen. Now I won't mention her last name. She's a Virgo, though. And we haven't seen each other a lot since we were teenagers. But I will always love her because she read me on a round deck. Now, I'd heard of the Mother Peace Tarot. That was round. This isn't Mother Peace. She was reading Daughters of the Moon Tarot. Round deck, goddess imagery. And by the way, at that point, I was all in with witchcraft. Mostly the goddess worship part of it. and it was a black and white deck, and some of them she had colored in. I was like, oh my god, this is great. What a great way to learn the cards. You can, get colored pencils and colored pens and actually draw them in. Except I forgot that I'm one of those Virgos that has trouble writing on things like in books, because I want to leave them virgin pure. But that deck changed everything. Really love that deck, and I'll pop some pictures up on that of that deck. It is my favorite deck. I've been reading with it ever since. Then when I left college, I left the Boston Conservatory because I was burnt out. And the conservatory wasn't easy. It was a conservatory school. Like, there was like 6 a.m. ballet class, and we took something like 18 credits a semester. I look back now, I'm like, I'm surprised I made it as long as I did. I was burnt out. And so what I did to support myself, to supplement my income, and yes, I got a job. Actually, that's when I really went into retail. My first retail job was at the Bombay company. I don't even know if they still exist, a stock boy. And then I worked at 9 West. I walked out of that job. I was like, this is draining my soul. Not a great joke. So I would read people. That's when I really became a professional reader. And I went to Kinko's, I think it was Kinko's, and I made business cards and I made flyers and I put them up all over the place. And I got some hits here and there. I got some phone calls. I did some readings. But where it really took off is I used to read cards in the Boston nightclub scene. Now, the only 3 clubs I can remember, I know there were more, was the Hub Club, which I remember was next to the Opera House in Boston. That was really the best place. I mean, it was really cool. Venus de Milo, which was on Lansdowne Street, and Axis, which was also, I think, next door on Lansdowne Street. And within like 2 weeks, it really caught on, where I was on the guest list at those clubs. They knew me, they knew I had my cards with me, and they would always let me go off into a quiet room. Like, I don't know if VIP sections were big then, but I know at the Hub Club they had a top floor with its own bar and tables and chairs really set back. You could have privacy and talk. So I used to read people, and I would charge money. I mean, I started reading $30 for a half an hour, $50 for an hour. And I read that price for a long time, except this was the 80s. And so I got paid in things other than money. But I got some fringe benefits along the way. So I got paid in cocaine. Oh, and because everything in Boston would shut down like at 2 a.m., like all the clubs and everything, it was all about going to the club to find out where the after party was. And, I got a deck of tarot cards, just like, is that the party I want to go to? Is that the part? I call these cuts, where you just cut the cards. Is that it? Is that where I want to go? Is that where I want to go? So after a while, I got invited to these after parties where I would sit and read and do coke for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Go back to a friend's apartment and still keep reading for cokeheads, because this is what I learned from that. Number one, the devil card kept coming up, which I learned is like, oh, that's about addiction. You're chained to something that you could remove the chain. If you look at the card of the devil and the Rider-Waite, you see the chains are loose around their neck. Could walk away from that, but no, I am choosing on some level slavery to this. And that cokeheads, 2 things cokeheads love to talk about, either love to talk about themselves, or they just love to talk, grinding their teeth into a fine dust, or they like to be talked about. So I did really, really well. That I still have cartilage in my nose is truly a miracle. By the way, I walked away from cocaine. I'm not a drug addict in that sense. Like, I can get up and walk away. Now, nicotine and caffeine, those are drugs too. I'm not giving those up anytime soon because I'm not ready for the detox. So then everything went to hell. I had to move back to Long Island. My grandfather had died. And while I was away, crackheads raided my apartment. What a shock. I was devastated moving back. It was like all of the Boston life and all of that freedom disappeared as I moved back into my mother's house, which, by the way, is a gorgeous house. I had my own room, really nothing to bitch about. But, of course, tarot came with me, and I started reading people. Clients, like, they came in. I remember my first group party, like, you do a tarot party, was like 20 people around a series of picnic tables in someone's backyard, all pushed together, and I just went around and read them one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. Dish rag afterwards, but it was a good first experience with that. And I never really looked back. I've been reading tarot ever since, so I guess what? I was like maybe 18, 19. So yeah, I'm 48 now. That's 30 years of being a professional reader. And I love it. Like, I can be kind of tired, a little burnt, but I have a spiritual practice that I do when I know I have to read somebody. I have a different spiritual practice for depending on what I have to do that day. Sometimes I just pray myself out of bed. And so I know how to raise my energy and get myself ready for a reading. And I have to say, when I do readings, like if I do 20 of them in a row, this isn't the case. But if I read like 1 or 2 people, my energy spikes afterwards, and it takes me a while to kind of ground myself and settle in and relax. So it's given me life. Tarot gave me life, still does. And I love doing it. But the part that really blows my mind, and we'll talk about this in another vlog, is how the intuitive development came into a place where I didn't need the cards anymore. I still use cards. I think the cards at this point are more helpful for the client. Well, they are helpful for me because when I get impressions, I'm what's called a clairvoyant empath. It means I see shit and I feel shit. And I've always been that way. I didn't know that that's what was going on. We'll talk about that in another vlog. That's a whole subject. But I started communicating with spirit guides, and of course at this point we were into the beginning of the New Age 90s, and I worked at Body, Mind, and Soul in Huntington across from the Walt Whitman Mall. I was their first employee, and there was Body, there was Mind, there was Soul. Mine was the bookstore. Because I'd read so many books at the interview, I could just tell them, I know that book, this is about that, this is about that, whatever. So I got the job, and then they let me do readings in an office in the basement. So I was like totally working. I would get off from work and I would have clients. So tarot was just consistent. But what I found through that is that my spirit guide communication, which I know sounds very tinfoil hat-ish, was constantly coming. Like I could hear them. When I say hear them, it wasn't like hearing voices so much as I would receive a thought from them and hear it verbally in my head. Only when I was reading, although it began to happen outside of that too, which is a natural progression, I now understand. So I would be things would fly out of my mouth at my clients that they were like, well, where is that in the cards? And I had to acknowledge that it wasn't. It was just something that I was seeing here. We'll talk about clairvoyance another time, where it was just image, picture speaks 1,000 words. As well as just getting information that was not in the cards. And it would blow people's minds. There was like, it's the way you said it. It was the way you put the words together that they would say was particularly specific to them. That if I had said those same words to somebody else, there might have been some truth in it, but it was the connection or the words or the way I would say a name. Yeah. And again, hooked. I was like, okay. So here's why I teach tarot. And by the way, I only teach people who want to read professionally. I am not a tarot 101 person. I teach the first level, which is the intellectual level, level 1, which is looking at all the symbolism and the structure of the tarot and the numerology and the astrology, all that's in tarot, because tarot is a wonderful system that brings together all sorts of different esoteric spiritual symbolism and areas of study into one thing. The second level that I teach is the intuitive, and you can't really teach intuition, but because intuition is not a gift. It is a skill, and a skill that everyone has, therefore not a gift, it's a skill, and that must be developed. You have to develop your own intuition. Read Carolyn Mace on that. Again, I quote her a lot, or I refer to her a lot. So the intuitive is actually my favorite level to teach, because we look at the different intuitive voices of each chakra and the foundations, the nature of intuition, as well as we get into spreads, and there are exercises that I do, and that's really fun. Oh, and I just recorded level 1 on Saturday. I don't know that I have 8 hours of footage. I got to edit that shit down, but eventually that'll be ready for video on demand. That's going to take me a while. Other projects I have to get done. So level 2, when I do it next, I will be recording that. I love that one. And level 3, so level 1 is intellect, level 2 is intuition. Level 3 is the spirituality part. The first half of the workshop is about spirituality, working with spirit guides, how to raise your vibration, how to know how to translate information to people in a way that they can hear it, which I think is an invaluable skill. And the second half is how to run a professional tarot business, because I have one, and I have had one for about 30 years. Dealing with tarot junkies and psychic vampires which the psychic vampire part is really a skill everybody needs to know, because psychic vampirism is at an epidemic proportion, and the vampire archetype is at the core of most codependent issues. Something to look at and heal if you can, which you can. It's just a lot of work. So those 3 levels. I teach everything in 3 levels, and I really do have on my to-do list a vlog topic of magic, miracles, and mysticism, which are the 3 levels I teach, which is the literal level, the personal level, and the symbolic level. Again, 3 levels of power I learned from Carolyn Mace. Bless her. Bless her. So, yeah, I've got a busy week ahead of me. I'm recording this on Monday. Going to try and get it done and published by Thursday. Thursday is my general day of releasing. I really look at the moon astrology, though, and the moon's going to be Sagittarius, which is like, yeah, perfect for what I want to do. I'm teaching a lot this week. I've got a bunch of clients lined up, but who knows? I'm also now doing reading clients on Skype and by phone, which I've been doing phone readings for a couple of years. I didn't like doing it for a long time because I like seeing the reaction in people's face. But when I started reading friends in California who needed help and realized that the clarity was the same, whether they were in front of me or not, I really enjoyed that. So now with Skype and Facebook Messenger, we can do that too, because you can do the video call thing. So yeah, I love reading tarot, and I love teaching tarot too. You know how they say those who can't teach, those who can't, teach? I can, and I teach. So I've broken that rule, at least for myself. And just remember, people, tarot is not about fortune telling. I don't think any divination system is. I think it's a way of reading energy, like a Geiger counter. And the symbolic system of the tarot, I think, is particularly relevant for witches, because we have the 4 suits of swords, wands, cups, and pentacles, which for me at least is air, fire, water, earth, and then the major arcana card is the spirit. So it's fire, earth, air, water, spirit, the pentacle. So I think that's a language witches can speak more readily. And I love it. I love being a reader. I love serving people. I am a Virgo. I love serving people with clarity. I love empowering people where they can get what I call the eagle eye view. Like when shit's in your face like that, it's hard to see. You get that perspective. You raise your altitude by changing your attitude, right? To get that higher perspective so that people can then see what's going on and make appropriate changes, not to feel damned or doomed to a particular outcome. Because we all do create our own reality. That's just law. That's the law of deliberate creation. Law of creation, the law of deliberate creation. You create your own reality. And tarot, I find, is a very powerful system to help you do that. And I have one of my kitties coming. Hey, buddy, come here. Come to Mama. You haven't met this one yet. Well, you've seen him in the background. This is Melkior. This is Danny's cat. This is my boyfriend's cat. I mean, we all live here, but this is the Melkior. He is my Taurus. And I've nicknamed him Cannonball, because when you pick him up, he turns into a little cannonball potato bug. And he is stubborn. But I love him. So for now, say bye-bye, Melky. He's like, fuck you, Mama. Say bye-bye. Look at those eyes. He's my good boy. Wishing you all a great week, and you will see me soon. Blessed be. Bye-bye. Go on, boy.